and welcome to the third session on the series Sharpen Your Intelligence. I'm so glad that you made it today. We began yesterday looking at how to nourish the brain, and today is part 2 of the same thing. So just to review, we had looked at few important neurotransmitters, right? Norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine, and we need them all together to have the sense of well-being, for our intelligence to work well, and also to preserve our memory, for that to function well. So we had started off yesterday looking at tryptophan and tyrosine. They are large neutral amino acids, and we saw that if we have too much of protein in our diet, which will give rise to other large neutral amino acids in the blood, then they compete. So then our brain doesn't get enough of tryptophan or tyrosine in spite of them being available in our blood. We also saw that having a higher ratio of carbs to protein is well for tryptophan and tyrosine to enter into the brain, right? The brain has this mechanism of the blood-brain barrier, which are blood vessels and other types of cells that make sure huge particles don't get into the brain. And so that's one mechanism for our brain to be protected from viruses and bacteria. But small sized molecules can get through the BBB. We also looked at how important the B family vitamins are for our brain. We looked at choline, that it's essential for acetylcholine, which is really needed for our memory. And then we looked at 2 character traits to help us sharpen our intelligence, and that is creativity and hopefulness. All right, so today we are going to begin with looking at this particular element of flavonoid. It's called Resveratrol. If you would remember, sometime back, there were studies that came out maybe in the newspaper and magazine that wine or alcohol made from grapes is beneficial to the heart. And that is because of this substance called resveratrol. Now, this substance not only is good for the heart, but it is good for the brain. It protects our brain from memory loss. It also protects from cerebral ischemia. Okay, so this is acute brain injury resulting from impaired blood flow to the blood vessels of the brain. And if it is not treated, then it can result either in permanent disability or even in death. Okay, so this substance protects our brain from this happening. It helps to grow cognitive enhancement, and it can also benefit in reducing secondary brain injury. So after we have a mild traumatic brain injury, something hits the head hard, that leads to secondary brain injury, and which can lead to ultimately the death of neurons. But this resveratrol can benefit in reducing that secondary brain injury. All right. It also keeps the brain strong and resilient, and it defends against neurodegeneration, which can happen due to the accumulation of proteins that are not really healthy for the brain. There are certain proteins that are kind of sticky, the amyloid beta, which will result in things like Alzheimer's disease. So this particular substance protects our brain from the accumulation of those harmful proteins. Okay, so resveratrol, a good source, a healthy source of it is from red grapes. So instead of drinking wine, alcohol, it's the safest to get it from red grapes, boiled peanuts, pistachios, and cranberries, and few other sources as well. In times past, they you kind of believe that moderate to low drinking of alcohol was healthy, but today's science tells us that no amount of drinking alcohol is the healthiest amount. All of us have different brains. Some of our brains are more susceptible to addictions because of different physiological differences. And those kind of people, just by trying addictive things once, will get hooked onto it. And so abstinence from alcohol is the safest, is the healthiest. All right. The next that we are going to look at is omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acids are so needed for the brain development in the fetus and after the child is born, and even while we exist throughout our lives. This omega-3 fatty acids are really essential. Now, as we age, what happens to our brain volume is that it shrinks. But omega-3 fatty acids helps to preserve that and reduce that quick aging process. And it is also associated with more gray matter volume. So gray matter, if you remember the structure of a neuron, you have the cell body and then you have that long tail like thing, the axon, and then the end. So the cell bodies where most of the processing is going on, that together forms the gray matter. The axons all together form the white matter. So all our processing mostly happens in the cell body, right? And so omega fatty acids is really good for preserving our brain and slowing down the aging process. It is also got so much of studies, so much of evidence-based research has been done on it that indicates it really helps with having greater hippocampal volume. Okay, so the hippocampus is associated with long-term memory. And if we want to preserve our memory, which then leads us, to take the information that we've read or heard long ago and then apply that. If that intelligence has to be there, our hippocampus has to work well. And omega 3 fatty acids helps with that. Omega-3 fatty acids also lowers the risk for dementia, obviously, since that is related to memory and all the outcomes and certain related outcomes with dementia. Now, the thing with omega-3 fatty acids, years ago, we could eat fish and that would be a healthy source of omega-3 fatty acids. But these days, because our water bodies are so polluted, it's not the same. In fact, there have been studies done on these group of people that are called Inuits. They live in the Arctic region in Canada, also in Greenland and a bit of Alaska. Their food heavily depends on fish. And it was observed in the past that they were protected from heart attacks because of their high omega-3 intake. But now in later times, that protection is going off because of the presence of mercury in the fish, right? And they have noticed that almost everywhere where you take fish and you study them for the presence of mercury, there is mercury. Unfortunately, our water bodies are so toxic, are all get contaminated, right? So when you look at our water bodies and things that grow in the water bodies, as you go higher the food chain, the concentration of the toxicity in that present in that water body increases. For example, in California, there was this lake called the Clear Lake, and it was very clean, a good place where they had good fish, clean source. Later, what happened was that it got contaminated with a pesticide similar to DDT called DDD. And after the pollution, they did some studies to see what's the biomagnification of this pesticide. And so they took some water, they studied how much DDD is there in the planktons, the tiny little things that grow in the water, how much of DDD is there. And then herbivorous fish that consume the plankton, how much of DDD they have, and carnivorous fish that consume the herbivorous fish, how much of DDD they have. And they found that in the water itself, there was 0.02 parts per million of DDD. When they studied the plankton, it had a little higher amount, 5 parts per million of DDD. And they looked at the herbivorous fish that ate the plankton that had 40 to 300 parts per million of DDD. And of course, when they checked out the carnivorous fish that ate the herbivorous fish, it was a huge amount, 25,000 parts per million of DDD. And that's what happens across all food chains, even in land. If we are worried about, fertilizers and pesticides getting into us through vegetables, then, the animals that eat those fertilized or pesticide-full plants, they're going to have higher concentrations of that particular toxin. And if another animal eats that animal, they are going to have an even higher level of that toxin. And then if we consume, then we are going to have such a high level of toxins compared to if we just ate the plant directly. Okay, so that is something to keep in mind. So coming back to omega-3 fatty acids, the cleanest source of omega-3 fatty acids comes to us from a plant-based diet. You can get it from flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, soybeans, green soybeans specifically, avocado, and wheat germ oil. Now, when you're consuming flax seeds, you have to make sure that you're blending them. It has to be in powder form. Otherwise, your body cannot digest and absorb all the nutrients from flaxseed. It will just get out of the body as a seed. Okay, so that is something to keep in mind. So very beneficial for the brain. Also helps in protection helps with depression. So if you know somebody who's going through depression, you can suggest them to take 1 to 2 tablespoons of flaxseed powder every day. It's good for us even to do it, and make sure that we have sufficient omega-3 fatty acids and preserve good volume of our brain. Then common vitamins, vitamin A, C, and E. I'm not going to go through sources of them because I think we know it. Retinoid acid, which is a metabolite of vitamin A, it helps with neurogenesis. And remember, we had looked about neurogenesis in the beginning. That is the formation of new neurons. Also, the survival of neurons, and for synaptic plasticity. So, vitamin A is very much related to the plasticity of our brain, neuroplasticity. It also helps in improving learning and memory. And it can help out with cognitive declines that are associated with the aging process. Now, what about vitamin C? Vitamin C, of course, all these have many other health benefits. We are focusing just on the brain. Without vitamin C, tryptophan cannot be converted to serotonin. So if we don't have vitamin C, even though we are eating enough of food that contains tryptophan, the right kind of ratio of tryptophan to other large LNAs, our brain won't get the serotonin, right? Now, vitamin C and beta carotene. Beta carotene is a precursor of vitamin A, helps out with memory in old age, and vitamin E slows down mental decline in older people. Vitamin E deficiency is very hard to observe. Usually, if you're eating a decent diet, you will get vitamin E. Okay. Uh, Coming to vitamin D, the vitamin which we should be having in abundance. Now, this is also an essential vitamin for the normal brain development and functioning. And it is protective of the brain in adults. So while children are growing up, as the brain is developing, essential. As we continue to grow older, it's still needed to protect our brains. It also promotes neurotropic factors. If you remember, neurotrophins are proteins that help with neurogenesis or the growth of new neurons. Now, the astonishing thing is, in India, we have abundance of sunlight, right? Except during the monsoons when it can get cloudy. Even at that time, few days, we still have sunshine. But in 2020, a study came out showing that approximately 76% of Indians suffer from vitamin D deficiency or insufficiency. And that is sad. But that is also something that we need to take care of. And so, as I recommended when we were talking about vitamin B12, check the levels of B12. Also check your levels of vitamin D. It's good to do a blood test and check if you have sufficient levels, knowing that a huge percentage of Indians suffer from vitamin D deficiency. And in fact, in various places of the world, a lot of people suffer from deficiency of this vitamin, which we can get so freely, right? Of course, the best source, the cleanest source, the healthiest source is direct skin exposure to sunlight. Now, this depends also the amount of time you need to expose yourself to direct sunlight depends on the color of our skin, right? People who are fairer need lesser time, and those of us who have darker skin, we need to spend more time in the sun. And remember, our skin has to be exposed to sunshine. Now, the best time, especially if we have darker skins, to get vitamin D from sunlight is between 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. I know a lot of us, when we were children, studied that, expose yourself to early morning sunlight and late evening sunlight, but many of us won't get enough of vitamin D if we do that. Okay. Another interesting fact about vitamin D is that it is when UV rays fall on our skin, and under skin there's cholesterol. Cholesterol gets converted to vitamin D. There's just one small difference in the molecule between cholesterol and vitamin D, and the sun falling through our skin that and affecting the cholesterol makes all the difference. So there have been studies that have also shown that people, when they get their vitamin D from sunlight, their cholesterol levels decrease. So I think that is amazing for the way we've been created to get enough of vitamin D. And that creation includes an awesome thing as sunshine. Well, not only is sunshine beneficial for vitamin D, it also helps, of course, kill bacteria. But the bright light from sunshine is so healthy for us. Sunshine helps increase serotonin production in the daytime. And those who go through depression, They are recommended to spend enough time in bright sunlight, even if they are dressed up, or even if there's a roof and they're just exposed to the bright light. Even that is beneficial for this. Um, so serotonin in turn helps prevent depression and fatigue. And so in places where some parts of the year they receive barely any sunlight, like very close to the poles, um, they now have bright lights to artificially stimulate the body so that serotonin is produced, and people with depression um, can benefit from that. Now, even sunlight coming through a window, right? If we are at school or at office, just that coming from a window improves our mood and also improves our mental performance. It helps with being alert, and it also helps with non-visual cognitive process. So the ability to absorb information and process it and think about it, reason out with that, that is something that light affects. It also balances our circadian rhythm, or a body rhythm, the time we get up and go to sleep. That is determined by the light exposure. So when we sleep, there's something called as melatonin that is produced. Now, melatonin is derived from serotonin, right? And serotonin is kick-started off with tryptophan, remember? We'll be talking a little bit about melatonin, but it is one of the most powerful antioxidants that we know of. One writer said that it is underrated, but it overperforms. But anyway, melatonin production needs to stop, and that's when our body wakes up, and blue light, does do that. Okay, so in order for light and this body rhythm to work well, we also need to go to sleep at a proper time. They're all related to each other. Another very essential element for our brain. Now, different sources will say that the brain is composed of anywhere between 73% to 80% of water. So that means just even a little bit of dehydration can affect our thinking process, can affect our moods, can affect our orientation. And a lot of dehydration can result in being disoriented and can result in headaches, can interfere with concentration. So water is also very essential for communication between the neurons. Remember, we talked about the synapse, the end of one neuron and the beginning of another neuron or another muscle or gland cell, and there's a gap in between, right? So in the synapse, there's liquid, and it's nothing but water. Okay, so it's really essential. As we mentioned, it's very much needed for our brains to function well, to concentrate. If you are having a headache, the first thing that you should do is hydrate yourself properly. It's something that my mom always says. If somebody says, I have a headache, the first thing she'll ask is, did you drink enough of water? I also remember that a lot of vitamins are water soluble. That is, they need water to be digested and absorbed. So all those vitamins that we looked at, the B family and vitamin C, they are water soluble vitamins. And so for them to have an effect on a positive impact on our brain, we need water. Now, dehydration negatively impacts short-term memory, numerical ability, psychomotor functions, and sustained attentions. There have been a number of studies that have been done on military populations to see whether dehydration plays a role, and multiple studies say that water is essential. And if they are dehydrated, then it really impacts the cognitive function. Okay, coming to some negative things that, some things that we eliminate totally and some things that we avoid or take in less quantity. Now, fat and sugar is high fat and sugar diets have been shown to lead in impairing the functioning of the hippocampus. And as we just mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, the hippocampus is associated with long term memory. And so you can imagine children who are being given sugar, right? Lollipops and sweets and this sweet thing and that sweet thing. You can imagine what it's doing to their brain. A lot of us don't realize when we are offering some kind of sweet or candy to a child, we are not offering something that is good for them. It is degenerative, not just for children, but for adults as well. Foods that make us fat also impair our cognition. Now, fats like omega 3 and omega 6, a good ratio of omega 3 to omega 6. We didn't mention omega 6 because omega 6, everybody gets enough of omega 6 fatty acid, but we need to maintain a higher ratio of omega 3 to omega 6, right? So that is needed. We need fats for certain vitamins, are fat soluble, and are some of our hormones also depend on it, but we consume too much of fat. If we would limit the amount of oil we intake and mainly depend on nuts and seeds as sources of our fats, we would be more healthy. All right. So um, eliminate sugar totally and be wise in what kind of fats and how much of fats we remove. So when I'm talking about sugar, I'm talking about refined white sugar. Now, one of the reasons, and I think I mentioned this when somebody asked a question in the first session, one of the reasons we crave for something sweet is because we don't eat enough of fruit. And fruits have so many vitamins and minerals that our body needs. And when we deprive our body of that, then we have this tendency to eat other sweet things that are not healthy. And some nutritionists, when they are trying to help people change their diets, instead of saying, hey, stop eating sugar, they will say, increase your fruit and then prescribe that they should increase fruit. And it's been seen many times that as people take part of fruits, they naturally give up things that have refined sugar in them. And so if you know someone in your family that's addicted to sugar, sugary stuff, a good thing is to say, hey, how much of fruit are we eating in our family? Are we eating any at all? And it's been observed throughout the world that a majority of people hardly eat any fruit. But fruits are so delicious, right? So let's increase our fruit intake and reduce our refined sugar intake. All right, another set of harmful things for our body is drugs. I'm not going to go into the details of this. There are legal drugs, tobacco, alcohol, prescription drugs is a whole nother set. I'm sorry I included it there. Illegal drugs, there are so many: opioids, cannabis, cocaine. You hear them often, ecstasy, in the newspaper and whatnot. And then you have prescription drugs. A lot of times, things like painkillers, antidepressants that are prescribed, people later on get addicted to them and they cannot function without those drugs. So you have to be very careful when we are using prescribed drugs. Some of you may be surprised to see caffeine on the list, but yes, caffeine is a drug. One of the signs of substances that are that cause addictions is that when you stop taking those substances, you will go through withdrawal symptoms. And that happens with caffeine. You can experience headaches and not be able to function properly. In fact, most people who regularly consume caffeine very frequently experience headaches and some days are like they go through it like zombies. You can stay alert, you can study, you can work with good focus without caffeine if you put other lifestyle elements into play. Make sure that you're drinking enough water, make sure you're eating enough of fiber, not unrefined food. Not refined food, sorry, but eating a lot of unrefined food, making sure that you're sleeping well. You do all that. Make sure you're getting enough of exercise. You will not need caffeine. And I can personally testify to that. I've not needed caffeine ever in my life. And that's never interfered with me putting enough of focus at work or at studies. That's fine. So you really don't need it. It's really bad for the brain, excites your neurons, and then afterwards there's a sudden drop in energy. We don't want that. Okay, so healthy ways of getting our brains to work is the best. So the best thing, as mentioned before, avoid trying them out, any of these things. Prescription drugs, maybe there might be certain conditions when you need it. If you go through surgery, of course, there's a lot of pain. But be careful how long you're using the prescription drugs. If you have been prescribed antidepressants, I would highly recommend first try getting your brain in order, upping your serotonin, boosting your mood through natural means, light and eating the right things, sleeping at the right time, getting sufficient sleep, drinking enough water. And then if things still persist, only then to go for antidepressants. Okay, so be very careful with this. Well, so we are going to transition now to our character traits for today. And I think it's very appropriate that the first character trait for today is self-control. In the 1970s, there was a doctor who did a set of tests on children, a psychologist. And I think you may have heard about these tests, right? So they offered a group of children marshmallows. Now, the children could choose to either immediately eat one marshmallow, or if they waited for 15 minutes, they would be given 2 marshmallows. And so as these children were sitting in these rooms and the psychologists were observing, he could see some children covering their eyes so that they don't see the marshmallow, or turn away, or pull their hair, or wriggle, trying their best to refrain from taking the marshmallow, because they know if they refrain, then 15 minutes later, they're going to get 2 marshmallows. But then there were other children who just gobbled them up immediately, gobbled that one marshmallow up. Then they followed these children, right, later years, and they saw that the children who had self-control, who could refrain from gratification, immediate gratification, they were successful later on in life. And so we can be naturally endowed with skills and talents, or even through genetics, got a good intellect. But if there's no self-control, there won't be success in life. However, if we are just, average, mediocre, but we have self-control, then success is sure. So, do you have self-control? Let's do a self-test of self-control. Okay, so you can rate yourself from strongly agree, disagree, neutral, agree, or strongly agree. And we have 5 statements for self-control. So let's see how you do. You can write down what matches for you, and see what happens at the end, or you can just keep it in mind. So the first statement: even when things get complicated, I do not give up. for those children with the marshmallow, for those who control the immediate gratification, it might have been hard for them because they're children, and that was like very young ages, between 3 to 6 or 4 to 6. What about you? When things get complicated, do you give up? Okay, second statement. I do not try to avoid projects that I know will be difficult. What happens? The third one, I am concerned with what happens in the long run, not just the present. And that is essential for self-control, right? When we take the time to see what is the consequence of this choice, this action going to be. And if we don't think of that, then we can make a lot of mistakes, hurting ourselves and hurting others. The next one, I avoid things that are bad for me, even if they are just for fun. What about when your friends, your colleagues are trying out something that's not good, that's not healthy, for fun? Can you still say no? Fifth one, people can count on me to keep a schedule. That takes self-control too, right? To make it up to appointments at the right time. So what did you score? If you mostly agreed to 5 of these statements, then you've got a good grasp of self-control. If not, well, we have the opportunity to develop it, right? Okay. So our second character trait for today is gratitude. Some of you may have heard the story of Nick Vujicic, I think. Nick was born without arms or legs. And as a child, he tried to commit suicide because it was very depressing to go through life as this. But as a teenager, he made the decision to surrender his life to God and to be grateful for what he has. He's turned out to be an awesome motivational speaker. He has motivated so many teenagers, encouraging them to be grateful for what they have. And life is not all that dark. There's always something to be grateful about. And I really think that, if Nick can be grateful, most of us have so much more to be grateful about. So do you possess the attitude of gratitude? Let's take a self-test. Okay, the first one, just like the self-test before. I could not have gotten to where I am today without the help of many people. Do we recognize that many people have contributed for us to get to where we are? Have we even thought about it? Second question. I reflect on how much easier my life is because of the efforts of others. Just think about it. Even to eat, somebody else puts the effort to plant the seed, to make sure the plant is growing healthy. And it's not a day's work. It takes several weeks, several months, just for us to eat, and so many other things, right? Because of the efforts of others. The third statement, for me, life is much more a gift than a burden. What do you feel? Do you strongly disagree? Disagree? You don't have any feelings about it? Or you agree or strongly agree? I can find things to be thankful for even when bad things happen. It is hard, isn't it, when bad things happen? But can you find things to be thankful for? What is the pattern of your life? Fifth statement: I have been so struck by the beauty or awe of something that I feel grateful in return. Something that when you have you ever paused to think about these things? So, what has been your response? If you've agreed to most of these questions, then you do have the attitude of gratitude. If not, it is our opportunity to develop it, right? As we go through these self tests, something struck me. It is only if we pause this fast going life, um, if we only take the time to reflect, it is then are we can know, how we are responding to life. If we are just going through life every day without taking the time to reflect, that's not good for our emotional intelligence. So I would encourage each one of you to take time at the end of every day to see how the day went by. What was your response to various situations? Is there something that you've noticed that needs to be changed? Did I hurt someone? Has something gone wrong with a relationship? What can I do to set things right? Take the time to reflect. Now, as we've been going through all these sessions, something that's incredible is that we have this amazing power. And as I mentioned it, as I don't know whether it was yesterday or day before yesterday, we have this amazing power of choice. We can choose to sharpen our intelligence or not now that we have some information on how to do it. That's on us, you know. And the reason we have this power of choice is because we've been given that freedom to make that choice. Now, who would give someone freedom? Someone who loves us, right? You think about our entire lives, and so many critical decisions need to be made. We could have been automated to go in the right direction. But no, we've been created with that freedom to choose whether we will choose what is right or what is not right, to choose something that's average or choose what is the best. And that comes from a heart of love. Now, when I say love, I don't mean a squishy, squashy, wishy washy feeling. I mean the principle um, that seeks for the benefit of others, even if it's in experiencing unpleasant things. That is love, to seek the benefit of another. So remember that our Creator has love for us. He is seeking for our benefit constantly, giving us situations, sometimes tough situations, so that it would refine our characters. It would be for our best benefit in the long run. He's given us the freedom to choose which direction we'll go, to choose whether we will go in the direction of love or to choose if we will go in the direction of selfishness. Choose wisely and choose the way of love. So, with that, we'll end this session.